Something I've come to learn about anime and manga is just how fleeting it can be. Especially in an era where the meta of anime is dominated by distinct seasons, each one filled with new single-season shows of only 13 or some odd episodes before just moving on to the next. And while I love this system, as the more anime gets out, the more likely one is to stick and capture the hearts of many, I think the more cynical reality is only a handful of anime are able to spend just a few moments, if any, in the spotlight, before slipping out of the collective consciousness. Of course, the other side to this coin is the series that do hit it big time. Those whose stories proliferate into multiple seasons, movies, and spin-offs, their names being brought up year-round, the anime able to breach into the mainstream in the form of Funko Pops and Hot Topic t-shirts. It's with all this in mind that I want to talk about one of these industry greats coming to an end. A series that spanned over a decade, has managed to maintain a level of quality that many shows can't even achieve in a single season, and will, without a doubt, leave an impact long after its final episode airs. Attack on Titan. If it wasn't already clear from the title, today's video is in regards to what I believe are the flaws of the ending. And while I know inherently that's going to paint the ending in a negative light, I want to preface that I have the utmost respect for Attack on Titan, and specifically Hajime Isayama. He's created a work that's been a part of pop culture for the past decade, has won awards, and for good reason. In both the manga and anime's run, they've consistently topped the charts, and nothing I have to say here will ever tarnish that legacy. While I wish I was making this video about singing the praises of its ending, I think it's important as a collective that we are able to acknowledge the flaws of Attack on Titan, and look to them not with any derisiveness or malintent, but as a point of reference for writing endings in the future. Because it's not every day that such a decade-long cultural touchstone comes to an end like this. Basically, I just wanted to say that, above all else, Attack on Titan will always be remembered as one of the greats of our generation. And to clear my conscience that I'm not trying to be a contrarian for the sake of it, or spark controversy in the name of views. I just have things to say about the ending, and I want to say them. Before we jump into the ending, I want to set the scene for what made Attack on Titan so great. Season 1, Episode 8, Chapter 9 of the manga. We learn Eren's a Titan, which at the time is convention breaking. We thought Eren was gone, and now he's back with this Titan shifting power. But that's okay. We're early enough that the stakes are low, and while we did get this fake out death, it was for the greater purpose of introducing this idea, so that it could be further iterated upon. Episode 17, we meet the female Titan, and it's gonna follow the same structure as last time. We start on the flanks of the operation, full of mainly no-name characters where the stakes are low, before then transitioning into the forest of giant trees with Eren, where we can now raise the tension of the situation, with a lot of added depth to the plot, because the female Titan is in and of itself an iteration upon the Eren Titan, so we don't have to give as much time for her. We can focus on the rest of the plot that we've started to build up. Coupled with this setup and expand method is how grounded the power system is of Attack on Titan, which is a weird thing to say about a series where people turn into literal giants, but hear me out. When I say grounded, I'm referring to how all of the, options available to the characters have clearly defined capabilities and limits. Even things as crazy as the Titan powers still abide to the same rules of the world in a way that's congruent to how they would logically function. I'm definitely struggling to find the right words, so let me just give you an example. Reiner, as the Armored Titan, poses a huge threat to Eren, and Mikasa and the scouts feel helpless as their blades are unable to pierce through his armor. The tides turn for our heroes when they realize in order for Reiner to stay as mobile as he does, his joints are left bare. The Titans, which are very physically powerful, still operate to the same rules and logic as humans do, just on a more colossal scale. Of course, there's a lot more that makes Attack on Titan great. The deep characters and stellar action, and while I'll definitely swing back for the characters, I think that at the end of the day, those aspects of the story would fall apart if the plot expansion and grounding didn't hold up. I've talked about plot expansion before in regards to the Promised Neverland, and it's a term I came up with to help quantify the introduction of new ideas in a story. As an example analogy, I just finished playing Metroid Dread, and in that game and other Metroidvania, it's common practice that you'll be wandering around the world until you hit an obstacle that you can't overcome. And so you'll note it down until you find an upgrade. And not only does this upgrade usually make Samus stronger in combat, but also functions as a way to overcome obstacles. But to make sure you know how to use your newfound tool, the game locks the door behind you, forcing you to use your new ability in a low-stakes room. Now just substitute Samus for the plot, and that is what good expansion looks like. Introducing ideas in low-stakes environments to then use those ideas to further the plot and world building. And again, this is an area that Attack on Titan exceeded very well in during the bulk of its story. Which is why it's so disappointing that the ending doesn't hold up to that standard. The chief perpetrator among them, the Founding Titan. I think where the story started this downhill trend was Eren being able to see into the future, which, oh my god, sounds so stupid when I say it out loud. And because it just wasn't like a brief premonition, he saw all of it. Past, future, he is omniscient. And if that weren't enough, well, when it comes to the Eldians, he can contact them from a distance, reshape their physical bodies, it's all from a distance, change their memories, and even influence people in the past, which is a whole other kind of long distance, and I think puts Eren just a few steps removed from omnipotent as well. Now, to their credit, Attack on Titan does use this idea fairly well because Eren himself has no royal blood to utilize his power. And so the plot isn't necessarily about fighting against this god like Eren, but instead about preventing it. So even though I may find the threat way over the top, creating the central conflict now around preventing the two from coming into contact is really understandable and brings us back to that grounding I mentioned. The ensuing battle against the Marleans in their surprise attack is, as a result, palpably tense, with every step Eren makes towards Zeke being literally one step closer to the end of the world. There's this weird mix as Reiner, Galliard, and Peak, who have been the enemies for so long, end up being a team to root for, and Armin and the Survey Corps are working against them on an absolute faith in Eren to have a hidden motive. All culminating in Eren charging towards Zeke is Gabby having just gone through the roller coaster of having Falco turned into a Titan, only for Galliard to sacrifice himself for the boy, takes one last shot at Eren, taking his head clean off. It's here we're better introduced to the paths of Eldia and the founder, Ymir. After going through memories, learning the Attack Titan transcends time, Eren convinces the founder to disobey Zeke and listen to him. In a flash, a giant spine reconnects Eren to his body before transforming into the Founding Titan. And it's hard because on one hand, it's a really hype moment as so much is going on and we get to see Eren as the Founding Titan start the rumbling. Genuinely, as I was looking back through the manga just to verify what happens, I ended up getting sucked back into it and reading 2 whole volumes just because it really is captivating. But as the adrenaline fades, I can't help but look back at this moment and see it as when the story would lose that tight grip on its plot expansion. This is like if a boss fight expected to use a brand new battle mechanic that you've never used up until that point, which actually happens in the original Mother 1. I personally haven't played it, and neither will you probably, but my friend Sketch put out a very in-depth retrospective on the game, and friendships aside, I really liked listening to it, and I think you would too. It was over a year in the making, and I think it would just mean a lot to him if you would at least go check it out. So, back to Eren being dead. He's not. And this is at least the 5th fake-out death we've had in the series, and we're just coming off the heels of Zeke living through a Thunder Spear explosion and being rebuilt inside the belly of a Titan sent by the Founder. So, while I might have been able to look past it in isolation, back to back with Zeke's, another instance of Founder Ex Machina, I'm left with this feeling that any tension the scene had was all just artificial if the Founder can just bail them out of any situation. It's a conflicting issue, because unlike The Great Pretender, which I just straight up didn't like, this was really enjoyable in the moment, but I think for a series that has held such a high standard of plot expansion and grounding in its story, this feels like little kids arguing on the playground. I mean, it sounds ridiculous, and this problem extends itself right into the final battle. As our new ragtag team of heroes land on Eren, they're immediately bombarded with the past iterations of the 9 Titans. Not like people turned into Titans, just homegrown, GMO-free Titans. And of course they're going to be struggling, so how do they turn the tides? Well, while Armin's inside the mouth of one of these Titans, he convinces the spirits of the Titans to work with them. Because apparently these aren't just copies, the founding Titan can also raise the dead. Even when they blow Eren's head off, stupid spine comes back separately, and Eren becomes a Colossus Titan. And it's not like he ate Armin and inherited the Colossus, he can just do that now. But I think Attack on Titan can still be forgiven. That so long as all this loosey-goose ass-pull writing is used as a vessel for a greater narrative point, then while it may not be my favorite, I'd at least be willing to appreciate what it was trying to do. Because AOT has some of the best written characters. I have mixed feelings about Eren. I liked him in the first 3 seasons, and especially in the first part of season 4 where he becomes the anti-hero. Killing everybody outside the island of Paradise does trip me up a bit, feels a bit overly excessive, but I can still appreciate him as a character. Armin is probably either top 2 or my favorite character, going from the weak nobody to leading his friends. I think his struggles with inheriting the Colossus Titan being a really nice deep dive into his character. Reiner's struggle with being a warrior versus being a soldier. John stepping into his natural leadership and his conflict with taking human lives. In the absence of Eren, I really think any character except for like Mikasa could have stepped up and become the emotional crux of the story. Because Mikasa is all style, no substance. She makes a really strong first impression being a natural prodigy at taking out Titans, and her backstory of Eren saving her from the traffickers is really cool. Until she immediately plateaus to just an Eren fangirl. And that's fine. There's enough interesting story going on around Mikasa that her one-note character doesn't necessarily drag down the story. But it'd be really underwhelming if Mikasa, who's been so stagnant as a character, was out of nowhere the center of the climax of the story. So, Mikasa is the center of the climax of the story. After loving Eren so dearly, she's the one who ends up killing him, and it's a twofold issue. First is that Mikasa finally going against her love for Eren is really unfulfilling. As a character, Mikasa's already peaked. The only ever character development we got from her was in Season 1 when Levi teaches her to be more in control of herself when she wants to save Eren. And since then, nothing. She's just been a badass. In this final arc, her love for Eren has definitely had her bumping heads with some of her friends in defense of Eren, and this love has been put into question, Eren touting it as just a function of being an Ackerman. But aside from the preceding moments when Mikasa stops Armin from swinging at Eren, it never really becomes any greater conflict. For one reason or another, the actions of our heroes always aligned with what Mikasa wanted to do up until the final moments. And when they do finally decide to kill Eren, Mikasa doesn't even put up a fight. The concept of Mikasa having to overcome her love for Eren has no substance going into the climax, and so the moment feels hollow for it. The other side to this coin is that this act frees Ymir, taking the power of the Titans with her. Now, stop me if you've heard this before, but why is this only coming up now? Why is this game-changing element never even foreshadowed? It feels like just an excuse to give everyone else a happily ever after, without all the hard work of giving them a happily ever after. Because guess who's God and saw this future ahead of time? In the past, it made sense. There was a clear win state to be achieved. Capture/kill Annie. Save Historia and Eren. Seal the wall. And so the climax was a reflection of achieving that win state. Whereas this feels like it was written backwards. That we started with this climax of Mikasa kissing Eren, and a win condition was created for the sake of that climax. It's fan service. It sucks because in classic Mikasa fashion, there's a lot of good happening around her. Armin and Eren fighting as Colossus Titans is sick, backed by a lot of emotional depth. Armin's had so much responsibility placed on his shoulders, being chosen over Erwin to be saved, inheriting the power of the Colossus Titan along with it. The same Titan who started this all on that faithful day he kicked in the wall. Beyond that, Hanji's also appointed him commander of the Survey Corps, leaving him to lead his friends in their plight against the Rumbling, and he's exhausted every chance he can to take Eren's side in hopes of saving him. But push has come to shove, and he's got to be able to look past his best friend, look past the person who saved his life, and kill him for the monster he's become. On top of that, there's Reiner on the ground wrestling that stupid spine worm, soaked in guilt that his actions on the island were not only irredeemable in their own right, but directly led Eren down the path he walks now. Reiner and his fellow warriors have been committing these sins in the name of a country who will only ever recognize them as honorarily equal. And now even that is put into question as the Rumbling threatens to raze the world to the ground. His line, "Peek, Annie, what must we do for our efforts to finally pay off?" really struck a chord with me, as he now has to fend off all his comrades and family who've been turned into Titans. And none of this is given time to breathe, as it gets cut short for Mikasa to have her flashback to Eren's talk with her. I understand that Mikasa is a fan favorite character, but I find it hard to look at this climax objectively and see how little character buildup there was with Mikasa, compared to how much more there was with other characters in the exact same fight. How the story has to bend over backwards in an attempt to create a sense of impact from this moment, and not feel underwhelmed by the climax. Attack on Titan has not just been consistently good, but consistently one of the best. In both writing and editing this video, I found myself on multiple occasions just reading on past the moment I was looking for, or getting sucked back into the animation. The title, Wasted Potential, has never been about saying, this series is bad and here's why. It's my way of saying I loved this series. This is a series that has reminded me why I love anime and manga. And it's devastating to watch that series not live up to its own standard. Attack on Titan was a smash hit success for the entirety of its 10-year life cycle, and it's going to go down as one of the greatest of our lifetime. But I think it'd be disingenuous to let that success and legacy cloud our judgment of the finale. There will come another Attack on Titan. And whether that is now or in 100 years into the future, I think discussions such as this are important, so that when a new series draws to a close, they're able to look back on the past mistakes of AOT and learn from them. So, to Attack on Titan, you truly were once in a lifetime. Not only have your greatest successes set a high bar for anime and manga, but even your wasted potential is sure to be a stepping stone for stories to come. Thank you.